Welcome, everyone. Bienvenue to a conversation on this fabulous cookbook, Dorie's Anytime Cakes, Life Between Two Ovens, Baking Anytime from Paris to New York. AFUSA is the largest Alliance Française network in the world, helping 26,000 learners of French each year learn French, live French, and love French. And let's share our wonderful video. We have been very busy at AFUSA, so please visit our website at afusa.org and learn about our wonderful events coming up. Notre Dame de Paris after the fire, the restoration of Notre Dame in Paris. French Cinematheque will be talking about the fabulous film by Richard Linklater, Nouvelle Vague. Another Notre Dame conference coming up. Adrian Leeds will be back to talk about Paris, and we will have Jacques Pépin visit us, being interviewed by my dear friend Jean-Louis Gérin. So lots on the calendar. A few logistics and format. Please stay on mute during the presentation. Stay on speaker view. And please put all of your questions in the chat and we'll get to them at the end of the hour. If there are technical issues, sign back in after a couple of minutes using the original Zoom link. And this event is being recorded for our YouTube channel, and the total runtime will be 1 hour. We are so excited to introduce, first of all, Jane Bertch. Jane is a Chicago native with 25 years living and working in Europe, including 20 years in Paris. She began her French career in financial services at an American bank in Paris's 8e arrondissement. Jane founded Paris's top-rated leisure cooking school in 2009. She is also the author of the debut memoir, The French Ingredient, Making a Life in Paris, One Lesson at a Time, that came out in April of 2024. Thrilled to introduce Dorie Greenspan. Dorie is the inductee of the James Beard Foundation Who's Who of Food and Beverage in America. She is the New York Times bestselling author and winner of multiple IACP and James Beard Awards. Dorie Greenspan is the author of 15 cookbooks, including Baking with Dorie, Dorie's Cookies, Around My French Table, Baking Chez Moi, and Baking From My Home to Yours. Writer of the widely followed Substack newsletter, XO Kisses and Hugs Dorie. She lives and bakes in New York City, Westbrook, Connecticut, and Paris. Welcome, Dorie. Welcome, Jane.
Thank you so much. Hi, Jane.
Hi, Dorie. I feel like we should be standing next to each other, but thank goodness for Zoom.
Yes, it's nice to be with everyone. Thank you.
I know. So I'm in the interest because I know everybody wants to hear all about this fabulous book. Just let me say what a wonderful full circle moment this is to be here with you on the other side, asking you questions. I'm absolutely thrilled. So one thing I know about...
Should just explain that's the full circle started when I had the joy of asking you questions when the French Ingredient came out.
Yes. So here we are. It's my turn. I just wish we were in person.
Make the questions easy.
I will. Maybe. So we've known each other in Paris for a number of years, and I would just love to know, and I'm certain those with us would love to know, you spent so much of your life in Paris and possibly so many formative things. What from your life in Paris has influenced your new book?
Maybe everything. It's so I first went to Paris with my husband. We were kids. It was our first trip, 1971. So, and I just landed in Paris, put my feet on the sidewalk and said, my mother made a mistake having me in Brooklyn. I just felt like this was where I was meant to be. And I kept going back and going back, and was lucky enough to start living there part-time almost, what's like 28 years ago, I think. So I feel as though it's hard to point my finger and say this influenced me or that, but France, Paris, the French language, it just became so important to me. And I can see it in all the projects that I've done. There's a little bit of Paris in every book and a lot in some of them.
I love that. It makes me think about the concept of le fil rouge, the red thread that runs through Dorie is life in Paris. Are there any French traditions or bakeries or rituals that you can point to that you think, okay, well, this really is present and this certainly had an impact?
So, yes. But asking that question made me think, and I'm just going to go back a little bit to question 1. After that, my math is kind of like I won't be able to keep count. But, when I think about it, after I came back from Paris, so I didn't expect to do this. I did a graduate degree in gerontology. I thought I was going to be in a university, and I was baking because I loved it, baking at home, and it kind of calmed me. But once I came back from Paris and I had France kind of spinning in my head, I don't know whether I was lucky enough to meet French people who helped me along the way, or if I was just so clearly looking for. But I have worked with some fabulous French chefs, and they taught me. I worked with Pierre Hermé, the pastry chef in Paris. I worked with Danielle Boulou, who comes from Lyon, but has been working in New York as a chef for so many years. I worked with Julia Child, who was not French, but really taught Americans about French food. And I think that France, Paris specifically, and all my luck of being able to work with these people has influenced me, has taught me about France, has helped me find a way to put a little bit of something French inside of everything. And so when you say, are there traditions? I'm thinking about those people who taught me so much, and some of whom have recipes in the book. So Francois Perret, who was the pastry chef at the Ritz, he just left. I have a big cookie from him. It's so funny because it looks so American. And I think it's called the Paris cookie because it's a cookie baked in a tart pan. And when it comes out of the oven, that's when everything goes on. Where we Americans would put the chocolate chips and the nuts and everything inside. You've seen this in Paris, Jane, yes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Everything is on top. And so when the cookie comes out, that's when the caramel goes on. That's when the nuts, and that's from Francois Perret. I have a lemon cake from Pierre Hermé, who was the first person for me, it was the first time I had tasted an olive oil cake. Now we see them everywhere, but Pierre was the first. There's the cake that for years, I'm so embarrassed, I called it a tiger cake. It was tigré. And so I had seen it at a pastry shop. It was a little cake, financier kind of cake. And it had little spots of chocolate and it had ganache in the center. And I immediately called it a tiger cake because I thought tigré meant tiger. And 30 years later, I looked up the word, and it's the word for a little tabby cat, which explains why I never could find why would it be called a tiger cake when it had those tiny little spots of chocolate and not stripes. And so 30 years later, it's corrected in this book.
Okay. Well, that is a revelation for me today.
But
Thank you.
Did you think it was tiger?
I did think it was tiger. Okay. So speaking about, these wonderful people that have had certainly an influence on you, would you say there's one overarching theme that they've shared or given to you that that has influenced who you are today? If you could pinpoint, there's one value or focus when it comes to culinary that you've really taken away from them.
Didn't I ask you not to ask hard questions? But you were my friend. This one's
I'm
really
sorry.
hard.
I know.
This is hard.
Well, okay. Let me give you mine, even though I'm not a chef,
Yeah, tell me.
just in case. Maybe this will help. I have learned, and this is more for baking from pastry chefs, I've learned a respect for precision.
Okay.
That's just one value that I've learned. Not from my cuisine chefs, though.
Not from your cuisine chefs. Huh.
Yeah.
So I was thinking less, I think I know I've been extremely lucky because the chefs that I've worked with have been tippy top. And first of all, I think chefs are born with some extra gene that gives them superpowers in energy. I mean, so there's something about that, right? I didn't learn that. They're so energetic. They have such stamina. But there's a love for what they do. There's a sense of generosity, of wanting to share. I think the best chefs that I've met are the ones who want to tell you everything about what they're doing and how they're doing it and want to teach you. So there's an openness and it comes from the love of what they do. And I think, yes, precision, yes, a deep understanding of why they're doing something, and like crazy creativity, just wild imaginations. It's funny. I remember, so I wrote 2 books with Pierre Hermé, and we were doing a book signing in Paris. And people always ask, where do you get your ideas from? And I asked Pierre, and he says, oh, everywhere. It's what I think most people answer. But so we're at this book signing, and a woman comes in with a little baby. And Pierre gets up and he kind of, touches the baby and says to the mother, what's her name? And the mother says, Celeste. And I'm sorry, that's my daughter-in-law. Wait, let me just press. Okay. So, sorry. So he takes out a little notebook, always had a notebook and pen with him, and writes down the name. And I said to him, what are you going to do with that? He said, I don't know. It's a pretty name. I just like it. 5 years later, there was an entire collection in his pastry shop called Celeste. And so I think about little experiences like that of people who are so interested in what they're doing, so passionate about what they're doing, that creativity, they can find an idea anywhere. I don't know if that answered the question, but
It absolutely does. So speaking of France, I think one thing we love about it in creativity is we've got limited access to things sometimes. And we heavily rely on seasonal products, which is wonderful. But when they're gone, they're gone. I hope that remains, because otherwise there's no excitement in them arriving. But what would you say are some of the ingredients or seasonal products that make you want to bake? When you see them, you think, I'm ready to go.
So I love that on your Instagram, you're always showing what's happening in the market. There's the Sunday market, and we get to see the market with you. And I love that when I'm not there, I watch you at the market. So when you said when they're gone, they're gone, I think about this all the time because it's mostly not true here in America. I think about asparagus, which I don't bake with except in quiche, of course, but that when asparagus come into the market, you are going to see them on every restaurant menu. And when you're invited to a friend's house, you will have asparagus. So you could have asparagus like 5 times in the week. and then they're gone. You go to the market and you say, I want asparagus, and the vendor says, you better get them this week because they won't be here. And then they're not there next week. Berries are the thing that just when you go into the market and strawberries have first come in and you're just walking and the smell of it, just, it's dizzying. It's well, it's what you said. As the new products come in, they're so exciting. You just want to either get into the kitchen and cook or bake. And it's so funny. I don't know where I thought nuts came from, but when I discovered that there was, I mean, it's silly, but there's actually a season for nuts, that nuts get harvested, and that there are fresh walnuts or fresh hazelnuts in the market. All of those things make me want to run to the kitchen.
Okay. Speaking of kitchen, if you had to transport 3 ingredients that you love from the US to use in your kitchen in Paris, what would it be?
Oof. So there are things that I bring. I bring more things back from Paris than I bring well, I'm in Connecticut now, from Connecticut to Paris. So I bring American flour to Paris because the flour is so different. So if I make a new recipe in Paris, I never publish it either in my newsletter or in a book until I've made it here in America with American ingredients and I've had it tested again in America. But I bring 5 pounds of flour to Paris so that if I want to start working on something, it's there. Is there anything else that I bring? I bring fleur de sel back from Paris. I bring cheese back from Paris. I used to bring butter, but now we can get really good cultured butter here. What would you bring?
Oh, goodness. I find baking tins. If I'm going to, and I will admit I'm not that much of a baker, but some of the friends that I have that love baking, they find that the baking tins here are just different and wonderful and so many different sizes.
The sizes are different. Yes. So I have a full set of American baking tins in Paris. It's more than anything, it's the loaf pans that are different. So yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, coming back to your book and baking from the book.
No, okay. I have to get that idea out of my head. I'll be thinking about that though.
Okay. Coming back to your book, we've already talked about it in so many ways, but all the influences that you've had in this book. And when I think of anytime cakes, I think of gâteau de voyage or a quatre quarts or, some of these cakes in French that aren't heavily decorated pastries. They're wonderful cakes that we can enjoy all day. Are there any cakes that when you think of those themes, influenced what you have in your book?
Oh, absolutely. So
okay.
This book, so I wrote Paris Sweets, which was all about French pastry shops, and I wrote Around My French Table, which was all about cooking in America and in France, and baking chez moi, which was, France, America, all about baking. This book has recipes. I went to Greece for the first time and I came back with recipes. I went to Italy. Actually, I went to Italy with you and I came back with, recipes. But if I were to do a count, of course, there are more French influenced recipes than any other country. But I think when I first started going to France, I was surprised by French pastry because my idea of it had been fancy, that everything was beautifully decorated and had layers of things. And I was so surprised when I found gâteau voyage, or I found just loaf cakes that weren't. And you find them, I found them then and now, even in the fanciest pastry shops, there'll always be a plain cake. And those are really, writing anytime cakes gave me an understanding of how much I really love simple, plain cakes. And so like the yogurt cake, that when I learned that recipe, I was told, this is the cake that every, an exaggeration, I'm sure, but maybe not by much, every French person makes and knows by heart. And I see somebody on screen nodding. And I've played with that cake ever since I got the recipe. But those are the cakes that come to mind when I think of everyday cakes. And the other cake, that I first learned about in France, and I've been making ever since, are cakes salés, or savory cakes, little loaf cakes that might have herbs or cheese or nuts, or meant to be served with apéro. That was a definite influence for me.
Okay. So speaking of influence, was there one thing, where did Anytime Cakes come from? You've done so many fabulous books. They're all different, but equally beautiful. What was the inspiration for this one?
So it started, I had said, I'm not writing another cookbook. I'm not writing a cookbook. You know that.
I may have heard that a couple of times.
And I was asked to write a story and come up with 3 recipes for the New York Times for holiday cakes. And I thought, holiday cakes, they're fussy. And I'm not a fussy baker. That's not what I'm doing. And so I thanked the editor and I said, nope, that's not what I'm doing. And before I hung up, it was like, comma, but I said, what if I wrote about and created for you 3 cakes that were very simple, the kinds of cakes that you keep in the kitchen, on the counter, maybe cakes that you would nibble on while you were making the fancy cakes. And in that moment, I hadn't thought about it before, but in that moment, I said, I'll do a story on kitchen cakes. And I was shocked. I think she was too when she said yes. And so that was the origin, just those 3 cakes. And as I was working on them, I remembered how much I love creating new recipes. I realized how much I love simple cakes. And they started to bring back memories, things I hadn't thought about in so long. And the start of it, I think, was really thinking about my mother's kitchen and how my mother, who loved food and loved to shop for food. That was her favorite pastime, that and clothes. But she loved to shop for food, but she never cooked. She didn't cook and she didn't bake, ever. But there was always cake in the house. So she would shop at bakeries and there would be these simple cakes that would be in the kitchen. And when someone came, as people always did, because the door was always open, she'd just slice a piece of cake. And the cake would be there for us as kids. We could just walk in and take a piece and go up and do our homework. And the more I thought about that, that became what I wanted to do. I wanted to create cakes that were welcoming, that could sit in the kitchen, that weren't fancy. The knife could be right next to them. You could just cut off a piece of cake and it would be just an invitation. And at dinners, if you put it in the center of the table, I think of it as the kind of cake that, because you're not fussing over it, you don't have to say, oh, wow, you can just keep talking. And so that was the start. And then came the recipes from memory, from friends, and from places.
Is there any recipe, Dorie, that you think you just have so much nostalgia for? Are there 1 or 2 that are in that book that means something so special to you? I know they're all special, but are there a couple that kind of pull at your heartstrings?
The honey cake.
The honey cake, why?
So when I was really young, and you have those memories that are they real? Did it happen just the way I remember it? But I remember my grandmother coming to visit and bringing food. I think she was always afraid that my mother just didn't feed us enough. And so she would come with a full meal and she would bring cookies, an apple cake, and a honey cake. And the honey cake was made in a loaf and it had almonds across the top. My mother she loved sweets. She didn't like honey cake, but she loved the almonds. And so she would just pick, she would be the first to open the cake. She would pick the almonds off the top. And I teasingly say I never saw a honey cake that didn't have holes in the top of it, where my mother would just take off the almonds. And I've never been able to make the apple cake. I've tried and no, but the honey cake, I truly would come close and not. And I just thought, okay, that will live in memory. And a friend of mine sent me, just out of the blue, she sent me a honey cake recipe. And she said, I think you might like this. And I made it. And is it my grandmother's honey cake? I don't know. But it brought back every memory of that cake. And so for me, that's the tug on the heart.
The tug.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Well, it's such a beautiful book, Dorie. And maybe this is a good time to show. I know we have a few slides, perhaps just to take a look at it again and tell us why this one is so different from your others. I know one is the beautiful illustrations, but maybe this is a good time to talk about how this one is just slightly different and special.
Well, so this is, that's the brown butter pecan loaf. This book does not have photographs. Oh, that's the honey cake. That's the honey cake. So my mother's honey cake, or my grandmother's honey cake, had whole almonds across the top. And I put sliced almonds, and a lot of them, so that for anybody who likes to pick off almonds, there are more than 5. So that's the honey cake. For this book, that cake is made, it's like a blondie, and it's made with cookie butter, like speculoos lotus cookie butter, and it has chunks of cookies in it.
Wow. What is this?
Yes, you know what this is? This cake is my cake version of the fabulous cookies from Moco Nuts in Paris. So Moco makes these big cookies that have cranberries, and they're made with rye flour, and they have that's my coffee machine. Wait, it's so noisy. Mm-hmm. Sorry. Okay. And they have poppy seeds in them. And I had made the cookie, and then I had this idea to cakeify it. And so this is the cake version of Moco's cookies.
Wow.
Yeah. Marble cake, which is also a cake from my childhood.
Beautiful.
Oh, that's the devil's chocolate cake. And it's about the third, it's the cake that was on the cover of Baking from My Home to Yours, which I published in 2006, was a cake that was meant to be like the Brooklyn blackout cake. And this is the cake, but made as a bun, and I fiddled with it a little bit. It's pretty as a bun, yeah.
Wow. Okay, so lots and lots for us to dig into.
Because they're illustrations, which I think is, I have had fabulous photographers work on my books. But I met an illustrator in I think I met Nancy Pappas in 2018, and I loved her and I loved her work. And I said, one day, maybe I'll have something that will be right for us to work together on. And when I started working on Anytime cakes, I realized that most of these cakes were going to be brown. There was going to be not a lot of frosting, not a lot of color, and that the subtitle could have been Anytime cakes, mostly brown. And so
Okay.
I thought I had a choice. I could have beautiful photography with gorgeous plates and dramatic lighting and cups and saucers and lots of props to make the cakes more colorful than they really are. Or I could emphasize the simplicity of them, the shape of them, the texture, just the brownness in many cases. And when I decided that simple was what I really wanted to showcase, I thought having illustrations would be a really interesting way to do that. And so the book, my recipe tester, a long time, Mary Dodd, and I baked all the cakes,
Okay.
took photographs. We tried to take, like, usually when we send photographs to one another, the kitchen sink is full of dishes and stuff. We tried to clean them up a little bit. And then we chose the ones we loved and sent them to Nancy, and she illustrated. And the process was wonderful and really hard because we were being asked, when you do a photo shoot, you're a princess, right? You
Right.
go, photographer, food stylist, prop stylist. You see the photos, you say, oh, I like that one. Here, we had to make the cakes. We had to decide whether they would be sliced or whole, whether we were, art directors. We had to think about the continuity. Okay, you can't have 5 whole buns in a row. We learned so much working on this. I always respected photographers, food stylists, and prop stylists, but
and it's really, really remarkable. I think, what a wonderful creative endeavor to go through for you. And
yeah,
then Nancy's work is just, it's remarkable. It's true artistry.
thank you. It was really an interesting process, but as I said, more difficult than I thought it was going to be.
Yes. So speaking of working together and things cross-pollinating, we have more in common than we do have. Let me rephrase that. We have more in common than things that we don't have in common. Are there any cakes that you would say are a North American French hybrid?
Oh, yes. Oh, I didn't think of yeah. So let me see if I can find it. Do you know I love them, the candies, they're usually like a chocolate round that are called mendiant. So they're bigger,
Yes.
and
Yes.
each nut or dried fruit represents a religious order. And
That I did not know.
yeah,
That I did not know.
so things have changed, but let me see if I can. Did I write this? Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Raisins for the Augustinians, hazelnuts for the Carmelites, figs for the Franciscans, and almonds for the Dominicans.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, and they're usually just a little palette, and they have the fruit on it. So and lately I've seen them with all kinds of dried fruit. So there've been apricots, and I've seen a lot of ginger. So I called them beggars bars, and they have the beggars fruits on them, but they're on top of American brownies. So I think that's about as French American as you can get.
Well, that's something I'd love to taste. I haven't had that yet.
When
Maybe
I
I'll
see,
try to.
when I see you in January, I'll be.
Excellent. So I want to talk just a bit about your life in Paris because there's, I can't not focus on that because that's how I know Dorie. What would you say if I were to zoom in on a morning of Dorie? What is she doing? Is she baking? Is she writing? Is she in a cafe? Tell us a bit about Dorie's Paris.
So I am, if it's market day, then the first thing I do is go to the market. So Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturday is the market at Maubert Mutualité, which is the one that's closest to me. So I'll be there. But I shop every day. I mean, I shop at the covered market in Saint-Germain. So I will go to the market in the morning. But most mornings, and market mornings as well, I try to do some work at a cafe. So there's a cafe very close to my apartment that I love, that's really comfortable. The people are lovely and are happy to let me just sit quietly and have coffee and a little tartine. And I leave before, as they're setting up for lunch, I leave. So I will write in the morning, and it's some of my happiest times. I'm just, as much as I love being out on the street and I can get a table right in the corner where you can barely see me, but I can see everything. And I love that. I love just being able to work quietly and to have that buzz, that sound and kind of music of the French language around me and the outside scene. That's often what I get to do, and I think of it as my perfect morning.
Okay. Wow. Well, maybe next time I can try to join you.
You sometimes do that. Yes?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the wonderful thing about Paris, once you do your time there, as you know, then you have your Paris, and it really does become yours. People recognize you when you come in there. You can have those pleasantries, you can chit chat, things that you don't necessarily do with a stranger in Paris versus, other cities. So I think that's quite nice. Dorie, if I were to pop into your kitchen right now, let's pretend I'm there. What is the cake most likely to be on the counter today?
It's over there. So I have two cakes.
Right, because one is not enough. Let's have two just in case.
One is actually the French yogurt cake. I'm not going to go over and get it, but I made it in very small loaf pans. Last week, I baked cupcakes with my granddaughter's class. She's 3. There are 23-year-olds in her class. And she asked if I would come in and bake cupcakes with them. And so she asked if I would bake with them. And so I thought I would make these small yogurt cakes. And so that was a trial cake. And because it was for 3-year-olds, I put sprinkles. So it was like a funfetti yogurt cake. So I have that. And I also have a gingerbread cake that I made that has chocolate icing. So yeah, you can come. There are anytime kitchen cakes for you. Come on.
The one thing I do know is you always do have cakes. And I love that. And I love the way you explained one, that it's an occasion to bring people together over slicing a cake without fuss. Without fuss, just spending a moment, having a little goûter. When people pick up this book, without you being there, I suspect you're not in every bookstore, just talking to people as they pick it up, what's the one thing you want them to leave with? What's the one thing that you want to share with them through this book?
So I've often, because I feel like I came to everything late, but because my mother didn't bake, and because my grandmother died before I could have baked with her. I didn't grow up with this, and I'm not trained as a professional chef. So I'm a home baker, and I'm a passionate home baker. And so I sometimes think of myself, because I love it so much, as like an evangelist for home baking. I want everybody to, join the order and bake at home and share what they bake. And so I would love if people looked at this book and thought, oh, I can do that.
Yeah.
I can do that, and I want to do that. So I would love to make people who are already home bakers even happier than they are by giving them new things to bake. And I'd love to convert some people.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's nothing like democratizing special moments. And I think making a cake, one that's big enough that you have to share, um, is certainly a special moment.
Right. I agree with you. I
Wow.
agree. Mm.
Just thinking about that. Food, as we say, is maybe the last thing we have to agree upon these days. So having occasion to to come around it.
Well, I think everybody likes cake. So.
And if they don't, something's wrong with them. Let's just be honest. What is next, Dorie? What is next for, let's say, the holidays? For
the holidays, I'll be baking a lot. But so I'm working on my newsletter. I always work on my newsletter, and I love doing that. And I've got an idea kind of perking away, but
okay.
It hasn't come together yet. But remember I said I wasn't going to write another cookbook, and
I know.
Yeah, so I'm not done yet. But for the holidays, we are going to be with our family. So I'll be with Joshua and Linling and the two little girls, and they've already made a list of things they want to bake. So,
well, now I'm curious. Can you share some of the list?
Of course. So they want to make breakfast every morning. So
okay.
when they come and stay with me, we do pancakes one morning and waffles the next. But now we're going to be together for 8 mornings. So we've got a lot of planning to do. And they want to make cupcakes because I made them with Vivi's class, but I didn't make them with Gemma's class. And so we've got to even that out. And they want to make cookies, and they want to be able to decorate them. So we're going to be pretty busy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's going to be fun.
So in that baking, lots of time in the kitchen. Is there any moment in your past kitchen experience where you felt like, when I'm doing this or I have this, I'm transported back to Paris?
So I learned to do something. Pierre Hermé taught me to do this. And it was one of these things where when he showed it to me, and it's got to be 30 years ago, I thought, why didn't I think of this? Or why didn't somebody else show this to me? So when you have citrus of any kind and you're using the zest, and you're grating the zest, usually you just mix it into the batter. But Pierre said, grate the zest onto the sugar that's going to go into the recipe, and then use your hands to mush and squish and press everything together. So that way, all the oils that are in the zest go into the sugar. And now I see people doing this, all the time. But whenever I do it, I think of standing next to Pierre in the kitchen in Paris, learning to do this 30 years ago. Yeah.
Wow. 30 years ago, and that still stayed with you. Is there any other tip you would, from someone else in your entourage, that you use often and it makes you think of them, or it's been instrumental in your work?
No, no.
Okay.
No.
Well, if you're cooking in the kitchen and it comes back to you, then I want to know.
Okay.
Because I know you've worked with some really exceptional people. So I imagine as you're
I've been very lucky. I've been very, very lucky. Yeah. I've had good mentors and people who have been kind enough to teach me and help me. Yeah.
okay.
Well,
I guess maybe because I know that I'm assuming our audience is going to get a chance perhaps to ask you a few questions, but before I let you go, oh God, I feel like I've got I have to ask the golden question now. What could it be? Okay, the pressure's on. I need to make
it easy for me.
Make it easy for you.
Yeah.
What's your favorite cake to eat at the holidays? Now that's an easy one.
That's really easy. So I love gingerbread, and I'm about to make this week, I'm going to make do you know these? Let me find this for you. Do you know nonettes?
Yes.
So
Yes. Let's talk about those.
so they're like gingerbread kind of. They shouldn't be made in muffin tins. So like I've done things like made madeleines, which should be in those beautiful scalloped molds. I've made them in mini muffin tins so that people who don't have to go out and buy a mold but can have the pleasure of a madeleine. And so nonettes are usually made, they're like pucks. And so I've made them in a mini muffin tin, and they're not meant to be moist. They're meant to be kept, and they get a little dry, and because you're not having them right away, the spices that you use in them have the time to really meld and infuse the cake. And so I'm going to be making nonettes for the holidays. And I have some because they're famous in Dijon.
Yeah.
And I was in Dijon, when was I there? No, September. And I bought some. So I'm going to have French nonette and my Connecticut nonette side by side.
I love it.
So,
speaking of France, because it's so diverse with so many different foods and cakes and, things that you'll find in the south of France are very different than apple cake you might find in Normandy. Is there any favorite of yours? Do you have something that you really adore from a specific city, special treat?
so people probably don't think of Brittany as being the center of delicious baked things, but I love the Breton butter cake, the cake that's made with salted butter, and I have a version of it here. And I was in Pont-Aven and staying at a little inn, and the innkeeper, it was in the morning, Michael and I were having coffee, and the innkeeper walked past us holding the cake, and she just kept walking. And I ran after her. I said, please tell me about the cake. May I have a slice? And she said, no. She said, it's warm. You can't have it now. But if you come back later, I'll give you a slice. And later that afternoon, she gave me a slice of the cake. It's again like a financier, and it has ground pistachio, and she had raspberries speckling the top of it. And it was delicious. And I said, may I have the recipe? And she gave it to me. And so that's, it's not really regional. Well, it is because I got it in Brittany, but I just quignon, which I don't make, but I love from Brittany. I like this. They're really mostly very simple cakes, and I love them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would agree with you on that. And the salted butter and caramel from that,
hard to beat.
from that region is pretty great too.
Yeah.
So I think we have some questions from the audience. If we're ready for some questions, or Dorie and Jane, are you ready for some questions?
Well, listen, I've hogged Dorie enough, and I'm sure everybody else wants a chance to ask her a question. So
I'm going to start with the first question, because there's been a lot of it's a question specifically to Dorie. I've tried many. I've read, as I told you before we came on, I read the cookbook this weekend, tried the first recipe, the first cake, made the apple cake, and I'm going to be making the devil's chocolate cake this week. So my question to you, it reminds me of a very old recipe that used boiling water in cake, which is magical. The batter looks very runny, but the cake is magical. But one of the things that I've been reading about a lot recently is the difference between Dutch processed cocoa and regular unsweetened cocoa. And in your recipe, you're not specific. And I'm wondering how you feel about either of those. There's been a lot written about not to use when with with unsweetened cocoa.
Right. And so depending on the recipe, I'm just going to take a quick look. Because, and I think I mentioned, well, we'll see the Dutch process here, but in the beginning of the book, I talk about the difference in cocoa. So Dutch processed cocoa is my preference, although you can make the recipe with both, because I think it's a darker color and I think it has a richer flavor. Cocoa has gotten kind of crazy, cocoa and chocolate have gotten crazy expensive, but I think that those are two ingredients that are worth spending the money for to get really good quality. And so like I love Valrhona Dutch processed cocoa. The American brand Guitard is also a nice cocoa, but Valrhona makes it's really a beautiful when you open it, the color of it is so beautiful. Yeah.
And then the other thing that's come up a lot is the difference between baking in glass and baking in metal. So again, as an example, many of us have had glass Pyrex, glass whatever, and I've suddenly bought now everything in the same size as in metal because I'm much happier with the results. Can you speak to that at all? Because I know you're all about precision, so I thought that.
Well, I'm all about wanting everybody to bake, so I'm actually a little loosier goosier than some people in that respect. But I prefer baking in metal. But it's funny because I think that on my original pans there were a lot of Pyrex baking pans, loaf cake pans. And there's a temperature adjustment that has to be made. And I haven't done that in so long, I've forgotten whether it's 25 degrees less with glass. But I've noticed recently in recipes that people are not necessarily making the change. But I remember that was an important message years ago.
Okay, it's interesting because there's a difference. A pie made in a metal pan is very different than a pie made in a ceramic or a glass pan.
Absolutely. I think I like things well baked. I like dark. I think that color equals flavor when you're baking, particularly with pastry, with a pie crust or a tart crust. And I think you get more color with a metal pan.
So we're learning. Okay, so question, we have a bunch of, aside from wonderful comments, a couple of, again, technical questions. Ola is asking, in the book, you have specific weight to convert flour from cups to,
yeah,
I can't read it, it's fading out to grams. Can you elaborate why this amount is different from the standard?
So last night I was talking to Joanne Chang, who's this fabulous baker in Boston. She has Flour Bakery. And the question of how many grams to a cup of flour came up, as it always does when you're talking to bakers. So if you scooped and leveled 10 cups of flour and you weighed them, you would probably get 10 different weights. Flour we don't have a standard measure for it. King Arthur says 120 grams for a cup of flour. They spoon flour. Other people scoop and sweep, which is the way Julia Child did it. Mm-hmm. So I measured 10 cups of flour, took the average, and I wish I hadn't said 135 grams. 136. I wish I had said 135 or 140, but that's my cup of flour. Joanne's is 140. Somebody else's might be 130. My advice is to follow the recipe. When the author says 1 cup of flour, 125 grams, that recipe, use what the author said. I established 136 as my house flour weight. And so when I'm looking at a recipe, somebody else's recipe that's not in grams, I will just automatically make it 136. It's really an issue among bakers that we don't have a standard. We don't.
So it's relatively subjective based on all the different numbers.
But
again, first time you make a recipe, follow the directions.
Yeah, but it's how you measure it. I mean, if I were to aerate the flour, put it in a big bin, aerate it, very carefully spoon it, not pack it down, and then level it, maybe I could get 100. I've never gotten 120, but I could get closer to 120 than to 140. And so, yeah, somebody just recently did a chart where they had a lot of cookbook authors' weights, and it went from 115 to 155.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
For those of us that are so interested in the book. And again, I think the advice probably from you would be to follow your directions
For my
explicitly.
recipes, yes. 130.
Yes.
Yep.
Marty Michels is asking my
Hi,
question.
Marty.
Oh, Marty, you
Question
made
for
it. Yeah.
Dorie. Which
Sorry.
cake from Anytime Cakes should I teach my 81-year-old dad who is just learning to cook/bake?
Oh, Marty. Hi, Marty. I see you. Have you made the yogurt cake with him yet? I think that would be a great, or make the visiting cake, which is so easy. So the visiting cake was one, the recipe was given to me 25 years ago or so. And the woman who gave it to me, her mother grew up in Sweden, and her mother gave her the recipe and said, when I see people coming down the road, I can start mixing this cake and it'll be ready for them when they sit down. And the cake is really easy, no mixer, you just stir. And for Anytime Cakes, I changed the recipe. It was perfect. So I just made it a little perfecter. And I added rum-soaked raisins, an apple just along the top, and some nut. And it's such an easy, delicious, delicious recipe. I think that's good for Dad.
All right, so we've opened up a huge can of worms with the flour situation, flour topic. But just one quick question. Does the flour weight depend on the type of flour?
Yeah, so cake flour weighs less than all-purpose flour. But if you're using all-purpose flour, just use the measurement that the author gives you. And I mean, this just also brings up the question of, wouldn't it be nice if every baker had a scale and weighed their ingredients? The answer to that question is yes.
Yes.
And I think many of us have read that we should all be purchasing scales right now and
Yes.
let's not wing it.
Yes.
And then if you think about that in terms of the United States, where if you invite somebody over for dinner now, they say, I'm gluten-free. Where are we with gluten-free flour?
So it's funny, Joanne and I were talking about this again last night, that a few years ago, this would have been a question of chemistry, like how many things to put together to make a good gluten-free flour. But now there are really good flours on the market. You can buy Bob's Red Mill in America makes a good one-to-one, and they work for most recipes. Yeah.
So just a couple of more questions. Suzanne, I have a question for Jane. I'm in the middle of reading your book, The French Ingredient, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm a teacher bringing my students to France in March. Do you ever teach a course for high school students?
Oh, Joanne, I hope you've picked up by now, I am not a chef, nor do I pretend to be. But I do a lot of speaking for schools and younger kids and older adults. So absolutely, yeah. But let's talk. We'll see if there's something we can do.
So that's great. And then let me see if we have anything else. We've answered all the flour questions. We have a baking powder question. I'd really love to know what is the typical ratio of baking soda and or baking powder that is typically used in a regular brown cake, not the bundt, but the regular ones.
I don't know. I usually when I do these start talking about it, I say I took science and math for poets. So even the word ratio or proportion, it's just, yeah. So you usually only use baking soda when you have an acid in the mix. So it's very possible for a butter cake, you might not even need baking soda. Once again, I refer you to a trusty recipe. I can't imagine a cake in which you would be using more baking soda than baking powder. Baking soda is usually measured in small increments.
So for a final question, what is this? Who's asking this one? Shirley Anyela Sharma is asking, what is your favorite cake of all the ones you bake?
That's a hard question because of course it depends on the time and I love, and I have for so many years, I love the visiting cake, and I really love the new version of it with the raisins. That's a cake that if that might be the cake I make most often. That just like, oh, people are coming, or I just want to have a cake in the house, I'll make the visiting cake.
Well, I think that's a great way to end. It's 5 o'clock, and I wanted, if, on the part of the Fédération des Alliances Françaises, AFUSA, thank you both so much for this wonderful conversation. And I want to make sure before we say goodbye that everybody is it bookshop.com that you prefer, Dorie? Bookshop.org. And this is a wonderful Christmas present. I've already bought 3 copies, and it's a wonderful book. The
Absolutely.
recipes are so much fun. I can't wait to put chocolate icing on gingerbread, which I heard you mention earlier. It's gonna, and just thank you so much for sharing this wonderful passion that you have for baking. Food is one of the greatest luxuries we have in this life, and we're very grateful to you for sharing everything that you
Absolutely.
love.
Thank you for inviting us. Jane, thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you. I wish we were in person, but we'll make up for that.
I'll see you in January.
Yes.
I'll be back.
And thanks to all these wonderful people for coming.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Bonne fête.
Bonne fête.